You've heard a number of people talk about, and Kirsten was mentioned just a moment ago, as describing the impacts on society that we're not really keeping up with. And without belaboring the point, I want to take you through an exercise with me, because my desire is to convince you to change your online behaviors if you haven't done it already. So let me ask you, have any of you had credit notifications from your banks in the last several years? Anybody? Do they do that here in the UK?
Online.
No, just a notification, a letter in the mail that your information has been compromised or taken, that you have to reissue a credit card. Anybody? Anybody experience that? Okay. How about identity theft? Anybody in this room been a victim? You have, Sophia. How about phishing scams? How many of you received those strange emails that say, click here? Right, more people. So have you ever known anybody who'd been a victim of any of these kinds of things? Wow, so pretty unanimous. It's ubiquitous. And I'd like to suggest, we use this term information age glibly. We hear people talk about how we've moved to the information age, but I'd like to really examine what that truly means. I'm borrowing from a colleague, Stephen Covey, the late Stephen Covey. I expanded on his model a bit, but if you walk through this with me and think through just exactly what does it mean that we've moved into the information age, and I think that you're going to get a sense, viscerally, of how we've upended ourselves without realizing what we've done. Certainly there's been a progression in terms of how wealth is accumulated. Wealth is accumulated through knowledge, through intellectual property. Advancement occurs through invention, but now we're seeing paradigm shifts, whole paradigms shifting quickly. Just look at what Ken went through with us with the cloud and how that's upending the way we do IT. The workplace. We're now dealing with networks. How many of you deal with networks online? I find that my network is often closer to me. I know more about these folks than I do with CubeMates that are just down the hall. Our time zones. How many of you are working strange time zones now? How about our sense of collaborations? We used to have corporate structures, nice and organized. Now we collaborate. Our tools are different, certainly. Our problem solving. We are looking at interdisciplinary, integrative thinking. And the Western world has been used to linear thinking, cause and effect. And certainly learning. Look at what learning is doing. It's moving online. How many of you have taken online courses or involved? Well, yes, many of you. You're taking the current course here. So just about every aspect of our life is being upended. And I love the language we use when we talk about the internet. We embrace the internet. We have a love affair with this technology. Often there's a honeymoon. When you look at the internet usage statistics, how many of you had a chance to go online and look at this data? It's telling. You're looking at over 2 billion people accessing the internet. I'm not sure how they get their numbers, but they are an oft-quoted source. When you look at how those numbers are distributed, it's even more interesting. It shouldn't surprise anybody that Asia, with its huge population, represents close to 45% of participation, with Europe and North America following. But then look at this picture. When you look at saturation, North America is largely saturated, isn't it? You look at Europe, not so much. Look at Asia. So what does that tell you as more and more people get online? What's going to happen to the internet and the characteristics of the internet? If years ago someone was challenging me about the U.S. right to free speech and how that value system had permeated the internet and had produced a situation where we were allowing pornography online, which was easily accessible to children. By the way, I don't approve of it, but it certainly is consistent with some of the cases around free speech. What's going to happen as the internet moves to different jurisdictions with more dominance? The characteristics and the cultural impacts of the internet and how we interact online. Now, having said all that, for all you Trekkie fans, we're being absorbed by the Borg, and I think resistance is futile. I'm not suggesting that we become Luddites, but I do think we have to wash away the honeymoon period and look at what we've done to ourselves in the cold, clear light of day. Because what we truly have done is we're smashing industrial age infrastructure. Think about it. I saw it when I worked at Boeing. When we put in local area networks and we began to connect layers of management, and they were having conversations they weren't allowed to have before, it just wasn't possible. So you had a factory worker emailing the CEO and telling him, my biggest need is for a CATIA machine out here in the factory, an $80,000 workstation. Next thing I know, manager of IT at the Everett site, I have a note from the big guy saying, get this fellow an $80,000 workstation. No justification, no rationale. He really didn't need it. The worker was thinking it's coming. You know, a couple years from now, we're going to have integrated design and manufacturing, so I better get up to speed. But certainly there were other priorities. So we saw a lot of unusual conversations happening as the different layers of management began to get used to talking with one another. But we're doing it again with the cloud. We're smashing through jurisdictions, nation states, legal structures. Wow, what a confusing mess. Always when we use a wrecking ball, there are what? Surprises, unintended consequences. So no one planned to have problems. We're just experiencing them, and they're coming at us fast and furiously.